Pasha, Paroh. Thank you for tuning. Today I have with me Eddie Karst. Eddie, say hi.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. It's great to be here, and thanks for sharing an opportunity to be part of your community.
Hey, I appreciate you joining us here as the community grows to help. We share a lot in common, especially about the future of the overall community. Um, Eddie, we're first of all, you got a great name. Like I said to you first time I met you, I said, when I see your name, I feel like we're going to have like the movie star introduction, like, you know, starring Eddie Karst, da 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 da, and then clap it up, everybody. Okay, so what we got here is we have an interesting situation. The world's seen it in various forms repeatedly over time, and it's a lot going on for a lot of people, right? You have the industries being affected by economic situations, which translates into households, which affects communities, and then now there's this growing threat of a pending global conversation. We'll just call it conversation, right? So, from a life coach standpoint, actually take a moment to introduce yourself, and let's start with that.
Yeah, sure. That's a big question to delve right into, but super fired up to do that. In terms of me, I suppose if I go a little bit further back, I have a pretty international background. My dad worked overseas when I was younger. I lived in the Czech Republic for several years. And then when I got into the working world, that also took me all over the world. So I was very blessed in that sense to come from this, I suppose, 15-year corporate environment, which was really all about transformation in and of itself, albeit it was for, big megacorps and large entities that we would probably know and recognize.
Hmm.
Um, and what I found over time on along that journey, which I'm super grateful for, it was that I kept running into this cyclical situation where I was really unhappy, actually. And that took on a variety of different forms at different times. And not unlike anybody else, we go through those waves, those ebbs and flows of life, and things were, I suppose what I tried to do for a long time was use my leveraging my external environment to try and influence how I was feeling on the inside. And I guess as I kept doing that, I kept realizing that through the lessons I was being provided with, that I had to go actually and start inward. And it got to a point where, I was essentially broke. I was emotionally broke, physically broke, mentally broke, spiritually disconnected. And all of those things came to a head a few years ago. And it was a moment for me where I was able to sit back and just say, okay, well, what is it that I actually want in life and want to do for the rest of my life?
Hmm.
And I really had never taken the time to sit back and ask that question. So that was a very pivotal moment for me when I realized that when I developed that sense of awareness of like, geez, I haven't actually defined what it is I really want, but yet I'm also telling myself lots of stories about why I am where I am. And we kind of do this every day. We tell ourselves different stories. And so I suppose it's in the context of life coaching is it helps us develop a better story. It helps us to go inward, to figure out what it is that we can do that really fires us up, and that it's going to be more sustainable and healthy for us in the long term. And I think if we all take that time to just take a step back and really reflect on that and get good with ourselves from the inside out, our world starts to change.
Yeah,
And that's what these conversations are really all about as well. And so thanks for facilitating a beautiful space for us to do that. And yeah, that's now my life is all about serving others. So that's it in a nutshell.
absolutely. And thank you for sharing, not only sharing, but being totally transparent because a lot of people are struggling with just being able to admit such things to themselves. Step one, right? And to know that there's other people out there who's going through it, been through it, maybe going through it right now, really helps them take a breath. and then that breath is needed before you can, have the energy in your lungs and your blood to go and fight to conquer and reach where you're trying to get to in life, right? So one thing I like to always tell myself is all time affects all time all of the time. So we may not understand why we're going through something right now in the moment, but that actually is part of our growth and development for who we're supposed to become in the future and what we're supposed to be doing. So a lot of people go through struggles, they go through things on various scales, and then that translates into intangibles that, just like you and me, we come back, we want to help the community in various ways because we have had that experience. It gives us a perspective that allows us to help people that may not realize exactly how close they are to it themselves. So you brought up a great point about the workplace. I think a lot of people don't realize what's the definition of a toxic workplace and how that affects the body. Um, the Mental Health America's research, for example, found that 90% of employees report that their workplace stress affects their mental health, and 60% don't receive enough support from their supervisors to manage the stress. Four and five, in fact, employees report that the workplace stress affects their relationships with friends, families, and even coworkers. So, with that being the case, you're talking about how a workplace, a person could be in there and feel what they feel, whether it's compression, illness, all this stuff ultimately coming from their job. And then that transfers in the community, their relationships, their quality of life with their spouse, their sons and daughters, their neighbors. We need to address this issue, right? As part of the healing of the nation, you would say, correct? How does a life coach really
Gosh.
kinda get in there and help somebody dissect that, first of all?
Yeah, well, you nailed it on a lot of levels, and it resonates for me too, just on a personal level. I went through a lot of the same things in terms of, the stressors, but really it was at a point where it was sometimes very difficult to actually shut work off, like you said, when we come home. And because we are energetic beings and very in tune with our surroundings, we're built that way. We
Mhm.
become, products of our environment, and that makes it very difficult sometimes to switch from one role to the other. And I think, when we go down the life coaching path, I mean, it's all about, first of all, figuring out what it is we do want, but then also understanding where we're at and what roles we currently play and how those roles, are serving us, but also maybe, working against some of the things that we might think we want and might think we're working towards in the grander scheme. So it's really about trying to facilitate a space where we can co-create and explore how to connect those two things together, right? And so really simplistically, it's like, where do you want to go? Where do you feel like you are today? Let's bridge that gap by, you know, putting in easy, small, incremental habits and behavioral shifts that generate a lifestyle change. Because really, coaching should be about lifestyle change. If you want to see things improve for yourself over the long term, then it has to be about lifestyle shifts and not just about, you know, diets, fads, temporary things. And I did say the small incremental piece with intention there because that's much more powerful than going, all in on something for a period of time, but then burning out and then having to restart and, build all that momentum up over again.
Right, right. Definitely do it in manageable pieces to make it sure it's sustainable. And in that space, right, when you're getting there, sometimes people are having difficulty, like you mentioned earlier, deciding that maybe where they're at isn't where they want to be, and they don't know where they want to go. Like you were mentioning about yourself, and I've been there before. Everybody's been there at least once in their life. A lot of that comes from them not maybe talking to the right people or having the right people around them to talk to. Two and three employees are not comfortable providing feedback to their manager. Um, 47% of employees know about their company's mental health services, but only 38% would be comfortable using them, right? So that brings into a space where you and your industry adds a ton of value, because even when they come home, they sometimes can't talk to people in their household. They don't want to hear. They're too busy. They're working with the kids. They got to cook dinner. Da, 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 da. Then they feel left out, burnt out from home as well, because they can't communicate there. Life coach actually steps in there and gives them that bridge to begin to bridge the gap, right? How does talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the key things that you nailed there, and thanks so much for bringing that to light, is who are we surrounding ourselves with, kind of on an everyday basis. So one of the things that, I always want to explore is like, who are we around? Are we keeping things in our life, for a reason, or people in our life for a particular reason?
Mhm.
Does that still serve me, moving forward? But it absolutely, sometimes we just need to build the right team around us. And as we really step into our power and access sort of that full accountability, but also that really intrinsic creatorship that each and every one of us really has, like I'm a really huge believer in that we all have that that spark within us that is so unique that will, add into an exponential way to the collective if we can tap into it.
Right.
And so that's where I like to focus a lot of my coaching, is helping to unlock that spirit. Now, part of that is the people that we're around, and but also the things that are in our wheelhouse of control are things like, who is the team that we're building? Who are the people that we're interacting with? And that's why I just even felt blessed, that we got this opportunity today to talk, because I think this community really resonates with a lot of those concepts, and I was checking out some of your other videos and really enjoyed them, and look
Thank
forward
you.
to exploring them a little bit more. But really, this is what it's all about. And so leading by example and getting ourselves ready to be future leaders, requires those steps, but you're not expected to ever do it alone. Lean into the resources that are available and leverage them. So even before I left, I'll just give one really good example that might resonate. Is before I left my corporate world, when I was in, a fair bit of disarray, I was proactive in the sense that I understood that there were services that were available, and a lot of them were covered, through the healthcare plans that are provided through a lot of these, through a lot of jobs out there. My sense is that a lot of people don't use those, and I made it my
Mhm.
mission during that time when I wasn't feeling great. I said, I've got all these things at my disposal that I never really used. I have to start pulling the trigger on some of these tools and start that discovery mission. And I've really never stopped that exploration. I have a strong curiosity within, and basically, what I've been doing is just trying all kinds of different things and seeing what works for me and what doesn't, And so my coaching does reflect some of that, because I think we are always in a great position to share with others when we've walked walked the walk ourselves,
Right.
And but yeah, I would always encourage everybody to use, if they have any of these opportunities and tools at their disposal, start exploring them, see what resonates, see the difference in how you feel. You'll get better at listening to yourself. And then as you continue that journey, you're going to find your favorite things. And eventually you'll get to this place where you've kind of got a team around you to support you in all these various ways. And it becomes very powerful when we start coming together in that way. And that's what these talks are about. And that's what building the community is about. And really embracing that idea of being the change that we want to see in the world.
Applause. Applause. Be the change that we want to see in the world. And if everybody did that, what would the world be a decade from now, right? So, Eddie, the workers' compensation, right? This is not advice. We're everybody knows it's YNet 7, and I told you you would fit right in with this community. Thank you for the feedback on the other content, and I'm glad to have you be a part of this and future content on the channel as well. So, workers' compensation, when it comes to that, like we often consider work injuries to be physical or to be disease related, you know, asbestos exposure, stuff like that. However, psychological and mental illness can also be work related. And some accounts say as many as 15 million US adults in any given year are affected by post traumatic stress disorder. And the workplace, per the AADA scientists that they appreciate, states that post traumatic stress disorder can be received, so to speak, from the workplace, right? And they're even accrediting a portion of like that massive number when it says this many million people died from heart attack this year. They're already agreeing that a certain percentage of those are actually just from people having a job throughout their lifetime, right? So with that on the table, post traumatic stress disorder affects, you know, cortisol levels affects entire systems in your bodies, and then we have this diseases and disorders. Speak of, you know, from your perspective when you were talking about how you got to the place where you didn't feel good at work,
Mm-hmm.
then you had the questions and everything. So there's a lot of psychological as well as then it starts to become physical. But you mentioned a great point. Having a great team around you is what I wanted to bring this all back to right now. Because when you're have the opportunity to choose your team, you go through and you do scrutiny of who's good for you, who's not, who's neutral, who's right. You make the checklist of authenticating who, what, when, and where, and why they're going to be on your team. However, when you join a workplace, you don't necessarily have the luxury of deciding who your coworkers are going to be, deciding their philosophies, deciding their mentalities, deciding if they give the same fuck about the job that you do, right? And the quality of work you want to put in, all of the above. So now you're left with a choice, right? So, how can, from a life coach perspective, what's the guidance on maintaining a healthy work life balance when the work portion may be what's killing you? And then, like you said, transition it into maybe starting your own environment, your own business, and go into the world of the world that you going to basically have another equation of the same parallel in some respects. Talk about that dynamic. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Mm.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah. Yeah, there was lots to unpack there. I think where I would start with it is what are the things that are immediately in our control? And then what are some of the things that maybe fall outside of our immediate sort of like, realm of control? Because I feel like, and this goes back to, when we were talking about earlier about the stories we tell ourselves, sometimes what can happen is we start telling ourselves certain stories as if it might be, as if we do have like, a say in certain things, like at
Mhm,
work, for example, with the people that we work with that you brought up, we don't always get to choose. And that's kind of one of the trade-offs of working for somebody else versus maybe going down that path of entrepreneurship or starting to explore how to leverage, your creatorship to do something beautiful in the world, from within on your own. But what I would say is if you feel a bit, stuck in a place where you feel like you want to make a change, but that's not in your wheelhouse of control, is to just try and focus on what is, and a good example of that is starting to do the things that really fill your cup and putting yourself first. In a lot of cases, we are taught and we've normalized putting ourselves in a position quite far down the list, in fact.
right.
And, I think as you move along the healing journey and through the ebbs and flows of life, if you can start to move yourself up that list, even if it's, gradually, then you're going to get to a place where now you're going to have a higher quality of vibration or energetic impact. You're going to feel better. And it starts on the inside. So whether it's, and I mean, these are the typical things, but we need to have a look at, what are we putting into our body? Because it's kind of, garbage in, garbage out for the
Mhm,
most part. Are we moving around? We're energetic beings, and that means, energy is always moving around. It doesn't disappear, right? And so it's just transferring into various forms. And so we want to be alchemists in that sense, that we are able to leverage all of that beautiful life force within us and put it towards the things that are going to create, I want to say, almost like a toroidal field of impact for us. Because as we start building and honing those skill sets and strengthening from within, that resonates messaging to the outer world. And that's where people start talking about law of attraction and vibration and these types of and manifestation about the things that we do want in life. They kind of revolve around that concept a little bit. So I really say, like, let's get good with ourselves. What is in our control? Well, I can definitely control what I put in my body. I can definitely control how much focus and emphasis I put on movement, and whether it's going to the gym or playing a sport, whatever it is for you. But figure out those things that fire you up and ignite that spark, and hang on to those. And it doesn't mean that it has to be the same thing forever either. These things are evolving.
Hmm.
But have fun with it too. Embrace the process. Try not to be too outcome oriented in terms of that gratification piece. I think that's one of the things that's always one of the hardest, is preparing ourselves to put in a bit of work, knowing that we might not get results right away. And the classic example is the physical one, where we can't, we see all the people in the gym in January, but then by the time June comes around, maybe it's a bit of a different look and feel in that environment. And so what you'll find, though, of course, is the people that are still there in June probably are experiencing some of the results that they've been, dreaming about. So there is a gratification piece there, and I think that that's something that we can always work on within and of ourselves. We are in a society where that's a big thing. Everything is at our fingertips,
Right.
and we have to manage that carefully, because if we don't, and we don't have that awareness, then we're going to get pulled in the direction of what other people are telling us, or where other people are wanting us to go. So the question is, do you want to be the master creator who's driving that force, or do you want to kind of let other things seep in, that might take you off your greater path, so to speak?
Totally, totally visible in the picture and the painting that you're putting up there on the wall. I think you really connect with a lot of people because, like when you said, everything's at your fingertips right now. So there's almost a feeling of being overwhelmed, um, by the uncertainties in life and by the expectations of society. So, you know, h- how do how does one put themselves first in those circumstances? Like, I know I talk to people and I'll be like, hey, look, man, what you got to do is find something that you're interested in, like you said, that creates that fire for yourself, right? Do that, and then maybe at some point in the future, um figure out a way to monetize it later on down the road, but make sure it's something you enjoy first, that you're actually doing and transitioning into, right? So, um how does one put themselves first, and while being overwhelmed with societal norms and the risk of, economic collapse? If you don't stay at this job, you may never find another one, and you got a family to take care of. What's the practical toolbox for people to actually find and maintain a sense of purpose and direction in today's world, where the dollar's falling off the cliff, the bombs are dropping, closer and closer to our shores here on our continent? What's that look like? What have you found, and what do you see from your perspective with that?
Yes, absolutely. So the balance, I think it comes back to attention. So, and you mentioned, that there's a bit of a kind of a, if we look in the wider space, like if we were talking about, media or what's happening in the world, and we can see it's quite chaotic. And there's lots of different facets to that.
Mhm.
Um, we definitely need to develop the habits that strengthen us from within, but also then help us to spend less time on the things that don't serve us. So
Mm,
really being honest with ourselves about, okay, well, how much energy and attention am I putting into things that maybe feel like sometimes they have an immediate impact on my life or your life, but really actually don't, because I think there's a lot of narrative out there that tries to pull us in, and that's sort of what a lot of, how marketing works and the media really works, right? They want to hook us
right.
with something and grab, so it really is, I think, a war of attention in that respect. And then it, comes down to, again, building our awareness around what we are exposing ourselves to. So there's the part of it about putting, what we eat, like if we take the food lens to it, it's like, well, what are we putting inside our body? But it's also like, what are we exposing ourselves to
Right.
from the external? So the better we can get with instilling habits and boundaries around how to use, I don't know, like for example, how to use tech and social media, to benefit us rather than to take away from us,
Yeah.
and that comes down to the attention piece. So managing our attention, but as you, like you were saying, as you find things that you become more passionate about, this kind of almost happens naturally, and you can, as you get excited about continuing to find those things that resonate with you, you're going to end up in a space where it's like your life has transformed into this place where you're like, wow, I have all these beautiful things in my life. I'm so happy about what I'm doing, and very easy to fall back into that very powerful space of gratitude,
Hmm.
and leading with love. But there are certain, I would call them almost critical success factors that we would have to be willing to face head on in order
Okay.
to get to those places. So things like brutal honesty with ourselves and an ability to open up and be vulnerable in the right space. And then tapping into that sort of that life force and that curiosity. I'm also a big advocate for continual learning and development. Of course, I'm a coach, but um, things just like as simple as like someone said to me the other day, readers are leaders. And I just thought that was a great one because, that's just one simple thing that we can do within and of ourselves, getting good with spending time by ourselves, but also, enriching our lives, So there's so many different ways and angles to look at how you might be able to do this. I mean, I've explored countless modalities of, self-development, improvement, healing, you name it. And I have the ones that I gravitate back to because they work really well for me. But again, it's not about what anyone else, I think, is really advocating and telling you. It's about, you know, using your attention to find the things that bring you joy in life, tapping into those, doing more of those things, and setting boundaries to protect those things, because life will try and get in the way, and this is where I think the coaching and the team can be helpful, because that's the support system that's going to help you overcome those harder moments within the ebbs and flows, where if it was just you, you'd feel maybe very lonely and have a really difficult time with it, or have difficulty in managing it, or just, it would make it a lot more drawn out and slower to move through that thicker piece of discomfort and resistance, because that's really where the magic is. We have to confront the discomfort
Hmm.
and the fear, and relinquish, the need for control that stems from that fear. So until we can do that, we're kind of at the behest of it in a way. Um, yeah.
I see. Interesting segue on the table because so life coaching is gonna provide coping mechanisms, stress management techniques, all that stuff for the normal life, but it'll also the same process and study of process helps allow people to cross that bridge when things arise that may be doom and gloom in society or in their personal lives. Um, because the resilience factor is going to prepare you for the highs and lows of life, which is really a good exercise of why people should work with you. Um, exposure. When you talk about food, we have to look at everything that we're in contact with. Go back to the toxic workplace and how that makes you feel. Is a consumption based relationship, right? So the exposure is putting it into our body. It's like environmental osmosis. Now let's move, because you said a key word here that I want to give you opportunity just to have fun with. Be vulnerable is a great buzzword. It has been for some years now. How does that relate being a man in a household where women see vulnerability as weakness? Give us that work life balance. the work
Oh,
the work life of being the work of being a man in a household leadership role, and the life balance of needing sometimes to be able to be vulnerable for psychological things, but you can't because then you appear weak in some perceptions, right? The
yeah.
billion
I
dollar
mean,
question, not million dollar, the $1 billion question right now, right?
yeah, probably if I could answer that in one quick sentence, then I could say I've got it pretty much all figured out. I can't, definitely won't be claiming to do that. What I can say about it again is, and because it's also a difficult one to answer because every relationship is so
Different, yeah.
unique. We're very unique in and of ourselves, but then when we bring two peas into the pod, well, that's a whole thing in and of itself, and really, I would say would require kind of a tailored approach based on the situation. If we took an example where the one you were giving, where maybe the man feels um, insecure about being vulnerable, I mean, I could challenge that. I could take a stance that says, well, what are you really afraid of? I mean, and if those are the types of reactions you're getting, and it can be reversed too. It can be the other way around, between the man and the woman, or whatever the situation is. What would your would you treat somebody in that way, and what would you say? So put yourself in the other person's shoes,
Mhm.
and when you replay that scenario back to yourself, what kind of intuitive feeling are you getting from that? Are you getting the feeling like, geez, maybe I need to set a boundary here and I haven't, or say something that I haven't said yet, to the person? But I think I would shine, we're all mirrors to each other. Let's put
Right.
it that way. And so just being open-minded and curious about how we're reacting and why to any, given response that we might get from somebody else. And just being curious about that. Because as soon as we add in that dimension and that element of curiosity, it's then very actually difficult to still be in that state of reaction.
Right.
So I think in a generic example, if we can hone that skill set around taking a pause and igniting the curiosity wherever possible, especially in the harder moments. I mean, that's a trait and a skill set that, I would I would venture a guess to say that most of the leaders in the world are very good at, because that's really what resilience can be all about in a lot of ways. It's not acting too quickly, when we get fired up inside and we have that rise of emotion coming through us. Um, but at some point on any journey, we're going to have to get real with ourselves.
Mhm.
We're going to have to be, we're going to have the vulnerability talk, at least within and of ourselves. If not with, I mean, start there. Try to have the conversation within and of yourself, and really be brutally honest with, how am I feeling? What do I feel like my life is like in all these different areas? Let's explore it. And is that what I want for the foreseeable future? And if not, how can I start making positive changes towards that? And that includes, that can include, the people in our lives. And sometimes it's very difficult because it might be someone super, super close to us. And, it makes it harder to set boundaries or release, even in some cases, the negative influences. But yeah, no, we have to take full accountability and jump into that, vulnerability. And I think there is a space in coaching specifically right now, just because of the way society is, probably a huge opportunity for the men to lead the way in that respect and tap back into, it's okay to feel stuff and to show it. Now, we always want to be careful about the forum, that we do that in, and how we're I want to say, like, presenting ourselves or mirroring ourselves to somebody else, because we can come at it and be, we don't want to be like in a place where we're scaring other people or dominant in that sense, but we still have to uphold how we feel. And so if we can be honest about how we feel and do it in a really constructive, supportive way that upholds that curiosity, that awareness of curiosity, we're going to
Mhm.
be in a really great position to have, wonderful conversations that are still difficult, but they are wonderful, that will serve us, for uh, rather than hinder us from, even from a stress cortisol perspective, or,
Right.
because that always, like you were saying earlier, that's where we get to the acidic environment within ourselves, which is where, that dis-ease, thrives.
Exactly. And I like that you brought up the curiosity factor because it's a question that I asked for the nation in general because from my perspective, I always say, you can't be true without considering the infinity, right? And that's where the people hear me, that know me know I'll be like, I'm a man of equations, not variables. And they be like, what's that mean? Well, equation is based on infinity, right? You see the whole infinity instead of a couple variables that creates the emotional belief, attachment to beliefs at the moment without consideration that, oh, this is the same, that's the same, all this other stuff is the same as this, right? Um, so when you get into some relationships in society, now that we've shown illustrate how that quote unquote buzzword of vulnerability works in a relationship, maybe a spousal relationship or a house or a man and woman relationship, or then we can expand it into the normative social influence world, right? Which is emotionally driven to being accepted and everybody else is doing this and da da da. It's more, it's kind of like emotional versus the informative socially influence. So what's going to happen is when you say be creative, to me that registers because be curious. It registers because it's like, oh, wait a minute. I tell people I don't do apologies. It's like I don't like to apologize and I don't want to apologize. They be like, what do you mean by that? I'll be like, well, one, apologies can be weaponized. As soon as you give one, now they can weaponize the future against you. They will get more, or once you accept one, the same thing. What I'm more so interested in is what were you thinking at the time? What was your thought process? Because then when I realize what your thought process is, it gives me the chance to say, hey, either I can relate to that or what steps do I need to take to make sure that that never gets close enough to me again, right? It's a learning process. So once you get to the point where you allow that curiosity to set in, that may be the vulnerability itself that maybe men need to not shift it from being, oh, I need to be vulnerable with her, but I need to be vulnerable with myself to say, you know what? Let me think beyond what I think I know, because to escape the first level of consciousness, we need to admit that we don't know what we don't know. So before I go and have that emotional stance or what have you, let me look at the situation from a bigger perspective or find a big picture and see if I can relate to that or not. Sometimes people say things to us, man or women, and it be absolutely true. I seen, and until I, even in myself, before I got to this point of thought process, years, decades ago. But I see it often now where people get mad or they get defensive, but you gotta coach them through. Look, it's absolutely true. And the bridge that you're putting, the wall that you're putting up is preventing you from being able to heal and then work with that person because now you understand how they viewing it and actually galvanize that relationship. What thoughts do that spur in your mind that you would want to maybe carry you into some things you want to add to the conversation and show the public?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's going to go a little bit back to, you know, the stories that we're telling ourselves. But you mentioned a good piece around, awareness and maybe being, inwardly honest with ourselves.
Hmm.
Part of that journey is really honing our toolkit and available sort of resources and curiosity to understand better that and implement in practice, that we are not our thoughts.
Mm, I like that.
I think if we can figure out ways to get good with ourselves from the inside out and build the curiosity and the awareness, then naturally the next step to that is to understand that, well, I'm a powerful master creator, and we are all divine, and we really undersell ourselves, I think across the board, just humanity and what we're capable of. Um, but yeah, like tapping into that, I think, because then we start to understand, okay, the thoughts are there. I'm not identifying with those thoughts because those thoughts aren't actually me, that's the
Hmm.
mind, the analytical mind that's at work there. And it does serve a fantastic purpose. So when I'm saying this, I'm not saying, you know, that those are bad things to have going on within us. We need those things because we have to be able to go out into the world and logically solve problems and navigate the matrix, or that anything in the external. We need all those tools, and we're complex machines, and everything does serve a purpose. But we do have to understand the role that certain things play. And often when we're in a state where we are under pressure and maybe in that more of that fear mode, fight or flight, um, we are in a place where it's easier to react, and it's easier for us to identify with the stories and the thoughts we're telling ourselves. So we got to be careful there about, what are those things we got to work on ourselves to get to the point where, the thoughts, we aren't our thoughts anymore. And then after that, it's much easier to do what you were talking about earlier, where it's sort of like, okay, how does that response that I'm getting from the person resonate with how I actually feel about this, in a calm state? We'll probably, and then, of course, the intuition factor will kick in. It will magnify,
Hmm.
as we start using that. I think that fear-based logic savior mechanism, the intuitiveness comes in, which is more closely linked to whatever you want to call it, our higher selves, higher purpose, divine spark, life force energy. There's lots of ways to describe that.
That's why there's many reasons why I like you, Eddie, and that's one is you have that well-roundedness about you on various genres of conversation topics, knowledge and wisdom that allows you to put it all together in a recipe to deliver someone from their current state to their future goals and destinations. And that's why one element of what I appreciate and wanted you to share with us in the community and the world even to help people get, because we got to make this change. When I'm looking to reduce the codependency of big government on large corporations, a lot of it is emotional factors, right? We got to get people to understand the value of we need to move from this space to this space because here are the benefits. Meet us, meet me, meet we at this destination. That way we don't have to convert you, but we can invest in what again makes you brings that fire to you because ultimately we need all of it when we get there to help create a sustainable community. So what I find is a couple things. I want to give you an opportunity to just speak freely about what you want to share with us. Before we get there, I have this one question for you because you brought it up and it popped in my mind. So the word when we can't relate, why that seven, and I'm a big fan of etymology. I'm trying to learn all the words, but it takes some
Mm,
time, right? But one of the words I do know, and we've talked about here on Why Net Seven, is the word respect. The etymology of the word respect actually means simply relate. Can you
mm,
relate to it or not? So think about all the energy and the manifestation of energy, the way it takes form when people feel disrespected, if they simply just flip the switch in this whatever emotional attachment they have to the word disrespect and say, "Oh, I can't relate to that," or "They don't relate to me." Now it totally like just makes it easier to think about and open up to the possibilities. And you brought up a great thing about we are not our thoughts, right? However, thoughts become things. And this is where we have to go into ourselves ahead of time, galvanize ourselves, right? Mind, body, and spirit. Or our thoughts can be weaponized because they can be infiltrated and repurposed for someone else. Now, here's the question I have for you. I had this saying that I find like when I'm doing project management and leadership of scenarios and stuff, and people, you always got the one person like, well, we don't want to work with so and so because they're lazy and stuff. I'll be like, you know what? Go get them. That's a great quality. I want to talk. I want the lazy person involved that you think is lazy per your perception because they're going to help identify the shortest path to get to where we're trying to get to because they want to do the least to get the max results, right? And what I spend time, and I want you to comment on this before I open up the floor to you. I spent some time talking to people in my time period about embrace that because it's not necessarily that you're lazy as the way society paints you. It's that pressure creates diamonds because you were mentioning how we're under pressure and pressure makes diamonds. And some people want to go to the negative thing of everything. Oh, pressure busts pipes. But no, pressure creates diamonds. Some people, they don't realize it or not consciously, but maybe in their self-conscious, they're actually waiting to the last minute because that's what makes them and come and produce the diamond with the pressure of it being last second or appearing all the ways they appear to be lazy, or they come up with an ingenious, innovative solution to something that requires the minimal effort, max ROI, because they have that vibration and frequency built in. How do you help people be okay with who they are, facing pressures again of the society telling them that something's wrong with them, or they have a disorder, or they're lazy, or there's something negative about them, so that they can convert that into great innovations, great gains that actually contribute to society and they can feel great about ultimately the same thing that people were trying to demonize them for. How would you approach that? Your email is
Yeah.
in the is below for the people that want to contact you for help there too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, please reach out. Love to continue these conversations. I guess there's part of me, I don't know why I was thinking this as you were saying that, but the
Mhm.
word that came to my mind or the concept that was coming to my mind was all about comparison, and kind of like
Right.
what we set up in our mind to be, I want to say even, or what we're told is like status quo, let's say. So we have a lot of things that are being said to us about what good looks like, what success looks like. And in the world that we're in right now, a lot of that is driven around, this idea of money. And, that there is merit. There is merit in that because,
Mhm.
money will give us the things, it provides us with choice, I suppose, in the simplistic terms. It gives us flexibility to, do what we want when we want, but it becomes a problem if we don't have enough of it. Now, the challenge that we'll have is the rules that we are sort of also brought up with in terms of the lessons that we're taught about what status quo is and what good looks like don't always actually get us to that place
Right.
where we can have that sense of power, freedom, and just a really, a vibrant, let's say, lifestyle that,
And
that
exists.
really feeds our soul. And so I think that's where I would take that conversation, is to say, what are the small things that what are the small seeds that I can plant today, even if it's just one a day? What's one thing I can do today that's going to give me a different result than I have been getting? Because if we keep doing the same sorts of things and exhibiting the similar types of behaviors, I mean, we do get the sense sometimes when we're in that loop that we want something else. But is that a reasonable expectation in light of our unwillingness to actually move the needle on our thoughts and our behaviors?
Hmm.
So, that's where the accountability, there's a bit of awareness there, but that's also where the accountability and fortitude is going to become very powerful, because we have to be able to do the one thing per day that does lead us in the direction of, now, if we're talking about a financial lens to this, I would say, well, what are you doing to build an asset, for example? Like, what are you doing to create that toroidal field? Because money is also energy too, and there was a book I was reading that my coach introduced me to not that long ago, called Money is God in Action.
Mm.
And that's a powerful title for a book, and it's a really short read. I recommend it, if someone's looking for something to add to their list,
What was the
or
title again?
Money is God in Action. I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but I can certainly get it to you, and we can throw it in the bio later. um, but it is really that concept of, if we're not diverting the the decisions monetarily to plant seeds that are going to start building an asset or creating cash flow that we can leverage toward building future assets, we're not creating the toroidalism that's going to be required to overcome the pressure that you're talking about, and free ourselves from that's the cyclical nature of you know that battle, essentially, which, and we're seeing that in a very real terms today, in terms of inflation and, fiat currency, the economics. I mean, we could probably do a whole episode on delving down into that side of things, so I don't want to spend too much time on, but ultimately it comes down to our, how are we using our energy, and are we actually making decisions that are going to give us those things that we think we're striving towards. So a lot of the work you're going to do in coaching is just getting real with yourself, in terms of how am I behaving, the brutal honesty there. And you will probably come out of that conversation with yourself and have a mixture of things. You're probably going to have some pieces in your life where you're like, that I nailed it there. That's exactly how I want it to be and how I want it to continue to be. But then there might be other areas where, it's like, okay, there's room to make, some shifts there. I know one of the exercises, I'll give you one tangible example of a great exercise for this,
Okay.
and where I started building from sort of a bottom up approach, would be take a spreadsheet out or something, and just put the 5 days of the week in the various columns, and then whatever breakdown you want time wise, and just create your ideal week in the life. What does that look like for you? Like, let's get really tangible and really intentional about what that picture is, because I think what
Like
can
a
happen
vision board.
similar to a vision board. Vision board is bigger. That's more of the top down approach, I would say, where it's like, okay, I'm like dreams, vision, big goals, sky is the limit. And also powerful, very powerful, because our brain understands images much better than words.
Hmm.
Another way to look at it too would be to do the bottom up, which is sort of like, okay, well, if I could pick the perfect week of how I would like every week to look for the foreseeable future, let me design that right now. And what do those things look like? Because we are, I suppose, somewhat limited in that sense, that we have a lot of responsibilities, most of us, where life is going to pull us in different directions. So we have to start in the place where we get a feel for what are those things in our life that I can't say no to, that I just have to do, as part of navigating this experience. And then what's left over, and what am I doing with that leftover? Because that's where the magic is going to be, in pivoting some of the things to plant the seeds that start creating the more regenerative cycle in that, into that toroidal field of energy that's eventually going to bring us into the place of abundance.
I like I like it all. I'm really glad that you brought up that what would your perfect week looks like, because it might I'm gonna add the translation for you and say, when you said vision board was this high level, I really think, okay, so once you get your high level, right, you can then say, okay, now we've created the destination. What do we need to do to arrive there? And now you can, because you want to not make your goal like your ultimate goal, like the next step, because then that, makes that the ultimate goal. So we want to keep that out there in the distance. Yes. I like the fact of the same equality of that week though, because in the same sense, if someone puts on a vision board, they clip out the picture of their fancy big house that they want, or maybe they want to buy a community, like start a town like me, or whatever, right? They cut that picture out, they paste it on a poster board, they put the Bentley or the truck or the fleet of cars or whatever they want, the helicopter, the plane, or what, and they post all these images on there and they hang that up on their wall and they look at it every morning while they brushing their teeth and they say, "This is where I'm going to be at. This is where I'm going to be at." Okay, it's going to take certain, once you get there, you're going to be living a certain day to day during that week. So almost for some people who maybe are going to be defeated or feel overwhelmed by, oh man, a Bentley, I don't know if I can put a Bentley on there. I don't know. I don't know how to afford a Bentley. They get depressed or distracted by really saying what they want on their vision board. Okay, put your week together. What do you want your week to look like? Boom. Now that you know what you want your week to look like, you can put that on there and create a vision board off the same way, you know, and then use that. And you're focused on continuous improvement. So, you set these goals and you work on it and you get the results and you measure against your entitlements, and then you can make tweaks to perfect it. Now, I like that you help entrepreneurial space, small businesses, small business owners, because when we started the last segment, he was talking about the status quo. And we have to go beyond the status quo. And that's one thing that you're big on, is you want to work with people who want more than the status quo. So I'm gonna give you the floor now. What is it that you would like to share? First of all, thanks for entertaining my Q&A for the community. What is some of the things that you want to share that maybe we haven't covered, that you want to let the people know about, and for various added value reasons?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me today. It's been such an honor to be now embedded part of the community here, and I look
Welcome,
forward
welcome.
to kind of the continuing journey that we're going to embark on here. In terms of what people can, I think, take away, is be kind to yourself. The world is a tough place right now, but just know that there are people out there, lots of people out there, not that are like myself, have devoted their life now to serving others, and we're closer than you might think or how it might feel at times. But just know that you aren't alone, and to reach out and try to remember in those tougher moments that you are a really powerful divine creator, and hold on to that, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, or make you feel or think that you're less than that. It really does, it starts there, and we have to embrace that divinity. We have to embrace that power within us. And when we start tapping into that, and really identifying with that instead of the thoughts, instead of the other stories, instead of what the status quo says, we're going to find the things that resonate at the deeper level. And, things will unfold, naturally, as they're meant to, in that respect. But the other side of that is also, when you think about where you are today, and reflect on what got you to where you are today, and you kind of get in that mode where you're thinking about the past, really think about that with a sense of gratitude and zero regret. So, I mentioned earlier a bit of, I didn't go too far into the details, but I just said, there were times in my life when things were extremely difficult. There was a point in time where I didn't want to get out of bed, where I had a sciatic nerve thing happening in my back, and I literally, like, it was hard to get out of bed.
Mhm.
But like where actually the mental and the spiritual was now manifesting in the physical, and it becomes very difficult. just remind yourself that, that's also temporary, and it's there just because it's trying to get you to tap into what's better for you. And that's where the putting yourself first comes in. It's like, are you listening to those messages that you're getting? Are you listening to sometimes they're subtle, but I think if we ignore those prompts or the cues as we move forward in our journeys, then if we pay attention to those cues, we're going to have a lot more success in striving to build the life that's going to be more aligned with our passion and purpose and all those beautiful things, our ikigai. If you're familiar with that Japanese concept where those four elements meet each other in terms of what we're good at, what we can make a living at, what makes us, I think, feel good. And there's one other one, I can't remember it now, but anyway, so I would
Yeah,
just say, don't give
circles.
up.
Don't
And
give up.
the help is there. The help is there, and tap into it.
I like the fact that you don't give up. It's really it's easy to give up when you don't know where you're trying to get to. So to have that destination, right, that you talked about earlier, and that way you can always hold it. Then we can factor in that accountability factor. So to not give up is something. Actually, I appreciate you bringing that up because that's what resonates here. Is again, I always say it, once we agree on a destination, it makes it easier to overcome all obstacles. And I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to speak because once we realize as individuals that we're all working with something within ourselves, right? That we don't give up on ourselves, but in order to not give up, we got to have the destination. Okay. Then once we reach that destination for ourselves, we feel better, we feel empowered. Now we're able to have the energy to empower the community around us because a dead battery can't charge the car next to you. That's, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So we gotta empower ourselves and enrich ourselves so that then we can come together and empower each other. And that's how we're going to change this nation. Make sense?
That's beautiful. And it really is. I love that because it starts with us, right? So it really is, in a way, it's a bit of a paradox because it's sort of like we're thinking about how can we get the collective to manifest in the way that we would like to see it.
Okay.
But that actually starts at the individual level, and it's good to be selfish about that and like take that full ownership around, this is who I am, and I'm figuring it out. I don't need all the answers. And in fact, you don't even always need to know how.
Right.
But just setting what you were saying, like that I like to call that the North Star, setting that North Star that, for our guidance system. Um,
Okay,
and and
Cadillac.
then and then working on the smaller things and the habits, in with that in mind, that becomes a powerful trajectory, and you'll surprise yourself.
I like the reference to the North Star, like the I think that's Cadillac's little system they got. So that's pretty dope.
So
Any any closing remarks?
no, just like I said, don't be a stranger. I'm here to help and have conversations and to serve.
Yeah.
Um, we're building communities, and so that's what it's all about. So stay close to the fire, and I'm certainly looking forward to continuing this journey and these types of conversations moving forward. So again, just thank you very much, and yeah, I think my info is in the bio if you do want to reach out. But there's a Calendly link that should be in there where you can book a time with me directly, or you can just DM me. I'm on Instagram, Ascend with Ed, and I'm also obviously Eddie Karst on Facebook and LinkedIn and Alignable.
All the links are in the description, and I'll put them in the first comment. Pin that in the comment on the videos on YouTube. And if you're on Facebook watching this, just hop over to the YouTube, either Pasha Paroh Y-7, and you can definitely find the links there in case they get lost in comments or what have you in the future. So, Eddie, I appreciate it. I look forward to also growing this and building and more conversations in the future to help grow the community. And just let me know. We'll collaborate and we'll build. And I appreciate you for your time right now. Say bye to the people.
Thanks so much, Pasha. Everybody have a fantastic week. New week, new moon. Great time to start something new. What a great way to start off the week. Thank you very much.
Hey, always the perfect day. Pasha Paroh, thank you for tuning. Enjoy.